Hello there, this is Dave Halverson from the Transition Project, here to talk about services for students with disabilities who are going on to post-secondary education. And I guess actually I have a guest with me today, Jim Hanemichael. He is with DakotaLink, and DakotaLink is able to help students to access and to learn how to use different sorts of assistive technologies. And these things can help to kind of level the playing field as students with disabilities move on from high school to a technical school or college or even employment. But today's focus will be more on the moving into post-secondary education. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Jim.
All right, thanks, Dave. So again, my name is Jim Hanemichael. I'm with DakotaLink, and DakotaLink is assistive technology, is what we do. Just a little brief background, DakotaLink's been in South Dakota for quite a while, since the early 90s, I believe. And I've been with DakotaLink for 15 years now. We have 4 offices in the state. Our main office is in Rapid City, South Dakota. And then we have offices in Sioux Falls, Brookings, and Aberdeen. And through those 4 offices, we cover the entire state as far as assistive technology goes. I happen to be out of the Brookings office, so I'm kind of that eastern side of the state as far as coverage goes. With DakotaLink, like I said, we do assistive technology, so a lot of the students that are going from high school into post-secondary, it's a different field there. You're not going to have the same supports that you might have. You don't have a special ed room to go to. You don't have a paraprofessional that's going to help you with taking notes. So you have to have some other tools with you to help out with those areas. And that's where DakotaLink can help out. We have access to a wide variety of assistive technology. And a little bit later, I'm going to just do brief demonstrations and explanations on some of those products. And they certainly are not everything that's available. But one of the things that always comes up is how much does this stuff cost? And from a student perspective, hopefully you don't have to pay for it. Usually there are other funding sources. So if you're in high school and, maybe you're a junior this year and you're, kind of planning ahead, your high school should be able to provide the assistive technology for you. Sometimes they will choose not to because of budget reasons, or they have something that works well. But like I said, for high school students, the school is responsible for that. When you go to college, typically, you're going to get that stuff through vocational rehabilitation. And so one thing I recommend is start early. Plan ahead, be working with voc rehab early enough in your senior year. Definitely by that second semester of your senior year, you want to be meeting with a voc rehab counselor and getting your plan in place. What will happen is voc rehab will contact DakotaLink if they feel that assistive technology is warranted. And one of our technicians will come out and meet with you and do an assessment. And we all do our assessments a little bit differently, but the way I typically do them is to go through a list of questions. And based on kind of what you tell me, we'll make some recommendations based on that. So if you say I have trouble with reading comprehension, or if I have trouble with taking notes in class, then that's going to help me guide what I'm going to demonstrate for you to give you some ideas as to what might be beneficial. After that, I send a report into your voc rehab counselor, and whatever they approve, we get ordered. And then I get it ready, and we schedule a time to meet and do training. And the part where I said start early, the nice thing about that is the earlier you can get started on this, hopefully the earlier you can get your assistive technology so that you can start working with it and learning how to use it. It's far better to get that in May, June, July, and be able to have a few weeks to play with it and kind of figure the ins and outs and get some training on it. Whereas if you wait until the middle of August to decide I need some assistive tech, you're not going to have it the first day of class. And then you're going to be trying to learn how to use this new technology while you are also taking classes and trying to learn your course material. We do run into a couple of hiccups there. When you go into a program at, let's say, one of the tech schools that requires you to buy their computer, a lot of times we can't get those computers early. So that does put a little bit of a delay on it, but we try to get that done as quickly as possible and work with you in your class schedule to get that training done. Along with providing the technology, we also provide training on how to use it. So we're not just going to set you up with, here's the program, you saw the demonstration, now go figure it out. I'll actually, if I'm doing it, I'll meet with you and provide training on all the features of the software or the device. And then if we need follow-up training, we can request that also. Along with that, along with Voc Rehab being probably the primary source for assistive technology in the post-secondary area, some of the schools do have their own assistive technology in place. You might want to check with the disability services coordinator as far as what they have. I always tell the students I'm working with, check with disability services. They are going to be a huge help to you when you go to that school. They're going to be able to get, just drew a blank there, adjustments, accommodations made in class. So if you have a need for a quiet testing environment, or if you have a need for a hearing assist system, I'll talk about that in a moment, they can provide some of that equipment or some of those resources. And so that's definitely a benefit to work with that individual. And again, earlier is better. Rather than waiting until halfway into the semester and you're sitting there struggling, and then you go meet with disability services, talk to them early, get things rolling early. So like I said, when I meet with somebody, I do the assessment, we talk about what you might need, and then we go into that and I write that report, send it to Voc Rehab, get it set up, get the training done, and then we go from there. We also support all of this, the equipment, the software. So I have students that will call me up and they'll say, I can't remember how to do this. I can walk you through it over the phone. If it's something that's a little bit more technical and you need some one-on-one time or we need to travel out, then we do need to talk to your VR counselor and get that approved. So that's kind of that big overview area. I'm sure some questions might pop up later, but I'm going to switch in and start showing some of the assistive technology.
Okay, sounds good, Jim. Let's see, kind of another area maybe that we could touch on just briefly would be just to kind of summarize again, for students moving on from high school to post-secondary education, every student's going to be a little bit different. There may be the student who struggles with reading, a student who struggles with writing, maybe organizational skills, possibly note-taking skills, or many other challenges. And it sounds like people are going to have personal preferences. That's they need to maybe try out these different tools that could be available. So let's see. Could we summarize maybe just quickly, for reading, what are just a couple of programs that might be things that students might want to check into to help with reading at the post-secondary level?
Sure. So the two that I use most often for reading at the post-secondary, probably the one that I recommend the most, that I have the most, that the students that choose, that is the Kurzweil 3000. That is the big one. It's kind of the Cadillac product of those reading tools. Text Help Read and Write is the other product that I showed. Also another very good tool. So those would be the two really big ones. There are some others out there, but those are probably the two really solid ones.
And let's see, and for students who move on to post-secondary education, probably, especially if they've been in special education, they may see a much higher workload or much higher reading load, depending on the major or the course of study that they choose? Would that be part of the reason why we want to look at some assistive technology?
Yeah, I think, I know that I wasn't in special ed, and I know that my course load going to college, um, some of my classes, not so bad, but other classes, my reading workload really jumped up there. So one, it was the time thing. And that's why the reading tools, if that's where the individual has the concerns, that's where they can come in. I've worked with students that have said, I can read it and I understand maybe 50% of it. And so I have to go back and read it a second time and a third time and maybe a fourth time, and I'm getting up to 80%, and I really don't understand it that well, but I'm getting pretty good. But I have to read it 4 times to do that. And I'm not a real fast reader. If I can hear it, then I absorb that knowledge better. I understand it better. So using something like that, one, I don't have to read it 4 times. I can listen to it and follow along as it's reading, and maybe once or twice, and I get that information, and I don't have to go back over and over and over. So that can be helpful. And because that reading load does increase, maybe you were getting by in high school because you didn't have a lot of reading. I mean, I had classes where I know I didn't read nearly as much as I probably should have, but between the lectures in class and the little bit that I read, worked fine. College was a different thing. You've got a lot more reading to do, again, depending on what courses you're going into. But, especially if it's that time thing, if it's a slow process and a difficulty with comprehension, and listening to it makes sense and it makes it easier, that's definitely something that that's going to help out there and help to alleviate that additional reading load that you have.
What about students who struggle with writing assignments? And I think, again, probably depending on the courses that you're taking, you may be asked to do a lot more writing. What are some key tools there?
Sure. So depending on where the difficulty is with the writing, one, I'm going to go back and say Kurzweil 3000 has that writing tab, where if it's a problem with just kind of mapping things out, you can use that brainstorm tool and that outline tool to help map out your writing so that you're not just going all over the place. So that's a good tool. If the difficulty is I can think of the topic, I can think of the materials, I could explain it to you. If you wanted me to give you a 30-minute presentation on how to strip down a carburetor, I could do that. But if you wanted me to write it down, I can't. It just doesn't work. Something like Dragon might be a really good tool because it would allow you to essentially give that 30-minute verbal presentation to your computer and have it written on the screen, and then you just have to go through and proofread it and maybe make some corrections. So those are some really good tools there. On that writing side, if it's something where that organization part is helpful, you really don't have the need for the Kurzweil 3000, for all those other tools. There is one, it's called MindMup, MindMup, and it is a free online mind mapping tool, brainstorm tool, like what I showed in the brainstorm portion of Kurzweil 3000. So that can be useful just in building that material so that you have that to start your writing process. But yeah, again, depending on your classes, I did not do nearly as much writing as my daughter did, but it seemed like she was writing a lot of papers. I'm glad I did not take her major because I did not enjoy writing that much. But yeah, depending on what you're going into, you may see a lot of writing, and again, it may just be the class that you take, depending on if you take a psychology class or a certain history class, those classes may have more writing involvement than others. So anything, if that's the struggle, I have worked with some people, we've just done typing tutors because they just wanted to increase their typing speed. It wasn't that it was necessarily disability related, but they had to pick up their typing speed because they were a slow typist. And so we did some typing tutors to help with that. But typically, if it's like I said, I call it that brain block where I can think of it, but I can't write it. I can think of it, but I can't type it. Something like Dragon works really well there. If it's a physical injury, something like Dragon works really well there. One place where Dragon does not work as well is if the individual has something of a speech impairment. I've had a couple of clients that we tried it and it just didn't work for them because Dragon had too much difficulty understanding their voice because of that speech impairment. But it's something that's where during the assessment, what I would do is I will say, okay, you've seen it, you think it will work, or do you think you want to try it out? Here's the headset, I need you to try it. And I will guide them through that and say, okay, I'm going to coach you, I'm going to tell you a few sentences to say, and then I want you to write 10 sentences on your own, tell me about your family. And it's a little difficult, but that helps us make sure that yes, we think it will work, or no, we're fairly confident it will not work. And so then we don't recommend that tool for that person.
How about note taking? Just a couple ideas on things that
Sure.
you might recommend?
Typically, what I'm going to do with note taking is recommend either that digital recorder or the LiveScribe pen. Those are the two that I've used the most. And again, some students will take both of them because they want that sort of that backup. If I don't get a good enough quality on the pen, I've got the recorder sitting up front next to the instructor. Others say I just want one or the other. And so again, that comes down to that personal preference. Some people think the pen is great and others do not want it. But those would be the two that I would typically recommend the most, would be those two devices.
Okay, and let's see, organizational tools. There's just a multitude out there, but maybe a couple of your favorites currently?
Sure. The ones that I use the most, and this is a personal recommendation. I use these tools myself. The Google Keep Notes. I use that for all kinds of lists and tasks and things that I need to do. I use the Google Calendar for keeping track of appointments. If I was in school, it'd be my classes and my assignments on there. I use the Microsoft To Do. I don't use that as much. And like I said before, I use the Wonder List, but that's going away the first part of May. So it's now switching over to Microsoft To Do. I used to use, before they came out with Google Keep Notes, I was a big fan of Wonder List. Use that a lot, recommended to a lot of the students I worked with. I will still continue to recommend Microsoft To Do if the individual thinks that is the best tool for them. But I'm a fan of all three of those, the calendar, the Keep Notes, and the Microsoft To Do. They're all really good tools. They each have a little bit different feature set as far as what they can do. So sometimes it does work best to use all three of them. And the best part is all three of those are free products. So you don't have to worry about even spending $5 to try out that. They're all free products. So that's one of the things I really like about them.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and the suggestions today. We really appreciate it.